This is Redefining Trade, the podcast brought to you by TradeWindow to shine a light on the future of trade. Every month, our host Peter Foyston will be joined by those who are shifting the dial for trade across New Zealand, Australia, and Asia. We will be exploring the latest thinking on trade innovation, supply chain management, export trends, digital trade, blockchain, trade law, trade in the face of COVID-19, and we'll be opening a whole new window on the world of exporting.
Welcome back to the Redefining Trade, the podcast that brings you the latest insights in the changing world of trade. And today, we have the great pleasure of having Anna Mowbray joining us. Anna is Chief Executive Officer at Zuru Group, which includes the world's third largest privately owned toy company. Anna grew up on a farm near Cambridge in New Zealand's central North Island. For 15 years, working with her brothers Nick and Matt, she was based in the Chinese cities of Guangzhou and Shenzhen, helping grow the family toy business and observing up close and personal the changing dynamics of global trade. Today, Anna is based in New Zealand and continues to lead Zuru's operations as it pushes into new categories on the supermarket shelf. Full disclosure, Anna is a shareholder of TradeWindow that recently listed in the New Zealand Stock Exchange. So Anna, thanks so much for coming today. We're really looking forward to hearing of your unique global perspective. So let's get right into it. So first, tell us a little bit about the origins of Zuru and how you and your family came to find yourselves in the wonderful world of toys.
Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. It's lovely to be here. And I'm also a very proud shareholder of TradeWindow. Very excited to watch that journey. So the origins of Zuru, actually my brother first sort of forayed into entrepreneurialism when he was actually only 11. And he developed his first product at that age, which was a hot air balloon that he went on to commercialize. And I think that kind of organically propelled us into the toy space. It was there after the fact that we're just children at heart and love innovation. I think that kept us there. So it's been a really interesting journey into an industry that is incredibly trend driven. It's almost like the fashion industry where you've got to be constantly reinventing yourselves. And I think for myself and also for Matt and Nick, we thrive and love change. And the industry, the toy industry, is one where you really need to be that way inclined, otherwise you don't really survive. So it's been a fun journey, and being in Asia for the last for 15, 16 years was certainly an eye-opening experience. But that was really what I think gave us a huge head start and kick up against a lot of other competitors within the toy industry, is the fact that we really anchored ourselves there. We got heavily involved into the manufacturing, the supply chain, the understanding of all those intricate details of how to really bring a product from inception through to life and onto retail shelves. So it's been, a pretty incredible journey.
The stories you can tell. But first, what are some of the major markets you serve? What are the hero product lines for someone like myself who is also a little bit of a kid at heart but might be interested in what's really coming down the pike?
Oh, there's lots of exciting stuff coming ahead. I don't know if I can tell you that though. Wouldn't want to, spoil the fun.
Well, no, especially with children. Christmas around the corner.
Yeah. Well, lots of that stuff's on the shelves now. So that one's, if it can get, shipped to New Zealand, that's always one of the constraints, isn't it? Look, we're truly global. So we ship to 121 different countries. And we really started off, interestingly, as a international distributor. So we started off really focused into international countries. Obviously New Zealand first, New Zealand, Australia, sort of moved into South Africa. And it wasn't until quite late in the piece that we really started shipping into the US. Our biggest market's definitely now the US. Closely, well, not so closely followed by, but thereafter followed by the UK and then China. China's been a big emerging market for us in recent years. In terms of success, we've had some pretty phenomenal lines in 2021. We've actually got, we had 4 items in the top 10 toy products this year, which was a huge feat. Yeah, pretty incredible. It's been a pretty fantastic year. But we had the number 1 and the number 5th selling toy items, both in the same brand, a brand called Five Surprise for us. So one was called Mini Brands and the other Mini Toys. And they're really miniature replicas of brands we know and love. And so during COVID, I think it really found its niche in the sense that it was a nostalgic play. You know, you're stuck at home, you just need a little bit of comfort, and you're able to collect these miniature brands. So really been a huge line for us. And to get an idea of the scale of that product, we're actually selling one mini brand every 3 seconds.
Oh, we just sold another one.
Just sold another one.
Fantastic. Wow. Oh, I love those kinds of stats.
I know, right? They're always good, aren't they? And then we have Bunch Balloons, which is coming, or it's just done its 4th season, and that has remained as the number 1 selling toy product in the spring-summer category since inception. And one really exciting thing that I kind of spearheaded on this line was moving it from being made out of virgin plastics into fully traceable post-consumer recycled plastics. So that meant that we were removing virgin material from the ecosystem. So we actually removed 1,800 tons of virgin plastic on that line alone this year, which is a pretty incredible stat in itself as well. But more excitingly, going into next year, we're pulling the same initiative across mini brands and mini toys. So the number 1 best-selling item, the number 5th best-selling item, and all other items within that range will all be made from post-consumer recycled plastics, just trying to really spearhead and push change to happen in the industry.
And are all your toys manufactured in China then?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And is it getting increasingly easier to get the recycled plastic so you can, because you have a lot of volume going. So, you know, when a big player like you starts to shift, sometimes the market has trouble kind of catching up to the dream and the vision that you have. How's that kind of happening?
No, you're bang on. When we first started looking to make the change, it was relatively easy. There was an oversupply of post-consumer recycled, and now it's getting increasingly tough. So gold standard, would have loved to change all of Five Surprise range, for example, straight into post-consumer recycles, make that difference happen. But we're actually having to stagger that just to keep, so that supply can keep up with demand. And I think that's where it's exciting, because we're helping to initiate that change to happen. And one thing I know and love about China is when there's a problem to be solved, it will get solved. And so that's a space where just with time, it will change. And again, another thing I love about China is the pace of that change. It will happen very, very quickly. So it's a nice space to play, and it's good to see that we can help that flywheel start to turn on moving more into PCR and it becoming more easily attainable from a pricing perspective. So still obviously a large premium, but that will change.
Yeah, as these things always do. And about how long is the life of one of your toys? Is it just one season? Have you had some that go on for 10 seasons?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of life for the consumer, that changes. I mean, most of our items, apart from Bunch of Balloons, which is single use, which is why I changed that into PCR first off. Most of our items have got a really long lifetime on them, right? So things like an X-Shot blaster, you'll have that blaster for 5 or 10 years.
Right.
In terms of the brand product life cycle, that is, like I mentioned or alluded to at the start, it's a very trend-based industry and it changes fast. So a general product life cycle, if you can get 3 to 5 years out of a brand, you're incredibly happy. If you're able to build something with a little bit more sustainability, like for us, a Bunch of Balloons, which is easily a 50-year brand, or it's a completely category-changing brand in the sense that it took making water balloons manually, tying them by hand, and
brings back the memories.
It did. It just revolutionized the playpen, didn't it? Because it was an awful thing to have to do, but we all loved a water balloon fight. So something like that's got a pretty bright future ahead of it. Or an X-Shot brand where we've moved into the blaster category. That's another one with great legs on it. But then you play with something like say a Rainbow Corns, which for us is a soft plush toy, for girls sort of 4 to 8, and that range has it's coming into its peak now, I would say, and then it will start to deteriorate slightly unless we can really find new ways to innovate and keep it super fresh. So it does have a shorter life cycle, these brands in the toy industry.
And you talked about, over 150 countries you're in. Which has been the easiest country to get into, and which have you found the most challenging? And it could be challenging for many reasons. Maybe it's what the children are liking. Maybe there's just a challenge of the channel getting in there. But which has been the easiest? Which has been the toughest so far?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think for many people going in fresh and cold to the US would be an incredibly tough market. For us, as I mentioned earlier on, we started off predominantly shipping international. So when we went and started shipping into the US, we'd already built a reputation and we already knew that we could service demand. We had brands that were really resonating. So for us, the US was just about accelerating our output and then ultimately to meet the larger demand. And then ultimately it became a fantastic move for us because those economies of scale just went straight to the bottom line and profitability.
Yay.
So we like that.
That's good.
Go profitability. So I think, for many people it would be the US, but for us it wasn't such a large barrier of entry. I would say 2 markets were really tough. The first being China, and then following that would be probably Japan, but for very different reasons. So China more from a structuring perspective, just the infrastructure there is very unique. It's very fragmented. So retail is incredibly fragmented. There's no huge players that control sort of 80% of the market. So really understanding the channels, understanding how to get product from manufacturing and from being a supplier into the hands of wholesalers into retailers' doors was a very different process than it was in the rest of the globe for us. Very territorial based, so you needed to really break down China almost into 5 territories and then assign all of your distributors within those territories to be able to deliver on the product. So we didn't move into China until 2018, even though we were in China for sort of 10 years pre that. I would say that I was a little bit gun shy about China and I wanted to do it right. So it really came down to finding someone who had really deep experience in China, someone that we trusted explicitly, and going slow to start. But by going slow, like I said, we started in 2018. Now in 2021, we're looking at in excess of 50 million revenue for that market. Next year, it's on target for 80 million, and that's still a very untapped market for us. The opportunity in China is huge if we do it right. You've really got to go heavy with the brand. You've got to back it deeply and ensure that you really get that deep penetration throughout the entirety of a very large nation. So China was tough, or a tougher market to enter, and you really have to trust in the people and make sure you just really are strategic about your rollout there. I think the other market that was difficult for us was Japan, but that was mainly because it's culturally so different. And you've got to be very, very selective about what products are really going to work there. So product market fit is incredibly important. And then, once you've got a product that does work within that market, just going deep and really backing it and making sure that you get the market well covered from a retailer perspective. But I would say those two were a couple of the more challenging ones.
It's interesting you talk about the cultural difference of Japan, which of course for many companies, that for many reasons it kind of has come out as a challenge. And in the toy business, often you kind of think, well, children are children. So did you find other countries where it was really more of a cultural challenge to make inroads as opposed to what you might have felt about China, which was more of a channel challenge, a size challenge?
Right.
I'm just intrigued.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, it's China was the same. Products that have worked in China incredibly well for us haven't necessarily worked in international marketplaces. So there's always, I think throughout Asia, there's quite a different culture to the West, and so that's one challenge in itself. Or then you've got things, like a lot of places in Europe, France and Germany, for example, or Russia, where the buyers are very selective. And you've got to make sure that you've got the right people on the ground in those markets who understand the intricacies and or the right structure. So, for example, 90% of our business right now is done FOB, but throughout many parts in Europe, they demand you to move into a domestic model. So it's just for us constantly shifting that model, looking at what we need to do to make it work. But at the end of the day, every market has its challenges. Are any harder to overcome than others? Not necessarily when you sit down and you just figure out where's the problem, what's the solution, let's just go make it happen.
Fair enough. And what would you say is the biggest challenge and also the biggest opportunity for manufacturers right now? Maybe thinking a little bit broader than just the toy, because obviously folks have also started to expand well beyond that.
Yeah.
And you have a good kind of global perspective, having such depth in that area.
Yeah. Look, I think the biggest challenge from a manufacturing perspective is just getting a grasp and a read on on pricing.
Yep.
There's huge volatility right now in raw materials. You're looking at plastics prices that have doubled. You're looking at steel prices that have doubled. You're looking at paper prices that have gone up nearly twofold in the last sort of 24 months. And there's still a lot of volatility in that space. You are seeing plastic start to sort of recalibrate itself, but paper's still really high. You've got labour that's going to be increasing, or the cost of labour that's going to be increasing again in 2022. So that pricing volatility in raw materials has been very difficult, because ultimately that affects your COGS, which has a trickle-on effect all the way down the pipeline. But then you've also had power shortages in China, which haven't been great. We've needed to set up little mini, electricity plants in all of our facilities in China, just to be able to overcome the fact that 2 or 3 days out of the week you're actually having to shut down your facility if you don't have an alternate arrangement in place. And then we've got the shipping crisis and the logistics constraints. So all of this is compounding to ultimately mean that pricing structures are having to shift a lot, and that's impacting the end consumer at the end of the day. So seeing prices increase is something we as a business have always tried to avoid. We've wanted to be that supplier that comes in and shakes up pricing strategies and changes the norm. Things like our X-Shop brand, we went in and we went head to head with Nerf, and everyone thought we were mad, but we went in with the USP of being half the price for an equivalent product. And so for us, and it's brand dependent, of course, what the strategy looks like, but for us, we've always wanted to be disruptors, and one of the ways that we've disrupted very successfully is from being incredibly competitive on pricing. So it goes quite against our mold to be shifting that pendulum in the opposite direction, but that's one of the biggest challenges for everyone, I think, in manufacturing.
And are you finding, as you say, this is such a broad scale challenge. Are you finding that the distributors, the ultimate retailers, are they open to these kinds of conversations? Obviously no one is happy about it, but sometimes there's times when you've got to jump in and take that pricing right away,
100%.
As opposed to waiting, and then everyone's like, well, just a second, everyone else took the pricing already and things have cooled off a little bit, and you've missed that opportunity. Are you finding that it's like go hard, go fast?
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up initiating a price increase at the top 21, and then we've done a second one again later in 21. So it was definitely received with some level of hesitancy, but also an overarching acceptance, in the sense that I was very thorough in my proposal, just ensuring that I really laid out for every single item where the prices changed. And with our deep entrenched understanding of China manufacturing, having our own partnership factories, they're really understanding raw materials all the way through to sort of what was happening on a political spectrum in China, meant that we were able to, I think, come at it from a very practical perspective, and we also absorbed a fair whack. So we tried to be very overly fair, I would say, to our retail partners. That doesn't mean it wasn't hit with some hesitancy and pushback and negotiation. But at the end of the day, our consumers are number one, and to mitigate that as far and as wide as we possibly can was always our goal. And I was very transparent with our retail partners in that space. And I think because of that, they responded relatively positively, and we had a really smooth path to change happening there.
Wow, that's it. Yeah, pricing, nothing but fun and games.
I know, right?
Now, you have a significant shipping, logistics, just hearing about the number of countries, and you mentioned a little bit about some of the problems of global supply chain. What would you like, what do you think can change here that can bring about a more systemic future that doesn't, that you could see you're able to make? You talked about making the customer great value. Is there something in the shipping logistics that you think you can bring about the disruptiveness that you've kind of been the hallmark of the company? Or is it more about this is more of a short-term COVID/Suez Canal/ who knows what the next thing's going to be, tornadoes and who knows where kind of thing, and if you just kind of stick to your knitting, this too shall pass, and you really should be focusing on other things. Where are you kind of coming out on those two perspectives? Because you see Amazon just going even further, planes, boats, trains, who knows what. Right. Other big companies are like, we know what we need to focus on, and we're not logistics players.
Yeah. And look, for me, I'm not a logistics player either. But it's a really interesting predicament that I think we're all getting the backlash from, right? You've got logistics prices going absolutely through the roof. You're still 4 to 5 times up on what we were looking at in 2019. And you've got to kind of wind it back a little bit and look at where it all started, right? You had COVID come into play, China shut down, all of these carriers thought, hey, with this, there's going to be this huge reduction in consumer buying. So they sent off a ton of ships to the wreckers yards and sort of said, hey, let's focus on our newer vessels, more efficient. Let's make sure we, narrow down our fleet and really look at where we can save costs, because we're going to have a massive slowdown in spend, which was the case in early 2020. However, it got flipped hugely on its head for the back half of 2020, and consumer purchasing power just went through the roof. And then that was coupled also by the fact that China shut down some ports. You had unionized strikes, and you had sort of this massive shortage in truck drivers and machinery as well at that point in time. So, it was these couple of factors that really compounded to cause one of the most incredible shipping crises that we've ever seen. And I think at this point in time, that's then been layered on top of with another battle, and that's that you've got a handful of carriers who are now sitting there and saying, hey, we've got this huge opportunity to cash in.
Rubbing their hands.
Right?
Pots of money.
Pots of gold. And literally pots of money. You're looking at Maersk having, I think they're, if I'm right about this, having had in 2021 about 17 billion in operating profits. So we're not talking small change.
No.
We're not talking small change. They had their most profitable quarter in their 117 years of operating in 2020.
I hear the champagne popping already.
I know. So, well,
just only on one side of the equation,
it's already been drunk, I think,
though.
but they're probably going to keep it popping, aren't they? So, you've got this handful of carriers who are ultimately colluding with each other to not revert pricing to where it was. So for me, I don't see change happening fast. I see this being an incredibly long-standing situation where there's no incentive to move back to pre-COVID prices. So how does change happen in that space? That's a very pertinent question. And I truly believe you've got 2 options there. One is governmental pressure, and then the second is actually looking at how you can consolidate buying power within a region to put pressure back onto and actually cause a negotiation.
Create a better
within these
equilibrium
carriers.
over time.
Exactly, create a better equilibrium. And you've got MSC now who's now actually, I think, overtaken Maersk in capacity that they've got with shipping. And you've got Maersk on the flip side of that saying, hey guys, if you don't have over 100 containers a week, you're all on spot pricing. So you've got big players there. How do we break, I guess, the mold somehow with them? Like I said, it's a big question. I don't know if I'm the best expert to speak on that, but
we're just here talking about trade.
There's got to be a shake-up. It really needs to happen. And right now, all of those big players are just sucking up the smaller ones. They're consolidating down. They're buying warehousing. They're buying, like you say, Amazon is as well. They're buying up the smaller carriers.
Yeah.
They're starting to get into air freighting in a bigger way. So it's definitely a situation that is scary from a consumer pricing perspective, and it's scary because there's no incentive for it to change.
Right. Well, I'd like to say that you've put my mind at ease, but I'd be lying. But that's okay. So in almost the 20 years you've been with Zuru, must have started as a small child, no doubt. Has the process of conducting international trade gotten harder or easier over the years? And I know COVID may have skewed it a little bit at the end here, but just in general, as you kind of think, is the world getting easier to trade in or harder?
That's almost like a never-ending question, isn't it? I think it's very business dependent as well. I mean, for us, I would say that trade has got exponentially easier. But that is simply a byproduct of the fact that we've grown as a business and our reputation has been so strong. We've got incredibly deep understanding of manufacturing, of supply, of our retailers, and we've got incredibly brilliant product. And that has ultimately allowed us to be a really, real star player in the industry. So for us, the trade's got easier. Our brands have got bigger. Our reputation has improved.
Success breeds success, basically.
Success breeds success, absolutely. So, off the back of that, we're sort of almost the golden child of the industry at the moment, touch wood, right? So that's a good place to be sitting. But, the Zoom boom has certainly been challenging. Sitting there through all of 2020 and 21, having to pitch product over cameras when all you want your buyer to be able to do is touch and feel it, and you can't even deliver physical goods to them because, retailers like Target have got a constraint on their buyers even receiving parcels of products from a supplier. So that's been a huge challenge. But again, brand wins in those scenarios, doesn't it? So brand and reputation wins. So we've been in a winning position, and we've actually, really capitalized that, and we've gone deeper in marketing. We've gone deeper in product innovation and development because we were coming off this platform that has really allowed us to, springboard. So it's, there's certainly companies that I'm sure it has been the worst time imaginable to be launching a new product. And then, it comes down to who's going to win going forward. And it's really those that capitalise on the e-com boom and really understand the Gen Z and the alpha consumer. Right. The digital native.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one other question before we get into a few of the kind of rapid fire. You talk about innovation, how important it is, but then you also talk about how the constraints of being actually able to even reach a buyer. So where is your innovation developed, or is it developed in numerous places, and how has that had to adopt, if at all, to the the last couple of years? I don't like to bring everything back to COVID, but why not?
It's one of those times, isn't it, where you can't help but. Look, for us, we are so deeply entrenched in our operations and things like that in China, and with our key people across the innovation pipeline, albeit they be in Australia, New Zealand, the US. We've been used to working in a slightly fragmented way, and that's just part and parcel of who we are as a business. So for us, that pipeline hasn't been affected really at all. We've got just such an incredible team who are so adaptable. They're always looking for new innovation, and it comes from so many places throughout the business, that they just go with the flow, and they've been able to, I think, make some of our best products in the entire history of the business over the last 24 months. So the future is looking so bright and so fun from a Zuru perspective that for us the innovation pipeline hasn't been impacted at all.
Well, that is fantastic. Now, I'm going to have just a couple of rapid-fire questions just to get your gut reaction. So first, perfect. New Zealand is a great place to dream up and deliver a global business from. Fact or fiction?
Dream up, yes. Deliver, no.
Okay, dream I get. So where would you be delivering?
New Zealand's not hugely pro-business. So I would be looking for a country that was just a little bit more inclined to want to encourage startups and want to encourage those dreams to come to fruition.
Fair enough. Second, when it comes to children's toys, is there really anything new under the sun, or is it just a slinky after slinky?
Look, is there anything new under the sun? It's an interesting terminology, isn't it, right? Because everything comes from the raw elements. There's not really anything new under the sun, which is, I believe, some of the deeper meaning of that. But heck yeah, there's new stuff under the sun. My gosh,
yeah.
We're coming up with great stuff all the time. So, false.
Great. The digitization of trade is happening faster than we think. True or false?
True. Thank you, TradeWindow. You're doing it.
Okay, well, now the pitch has been done. That's just okay. We're going to move to something slightly different, a little less serious. So, what's your favorite book?
Number one would be Shoe Dog. It's, just such a story of grit and creativity and tenacity, which is really what growing a business is all about, to grow, one of the most iconic brands in the world. And then also Good to Great. Jim Collins is a phenomenal author, and the theories that he built up there is something that I use as certainly guiding principles all the time, coming back to sort of, level 5 leaders, fact over fiction, the momentum that it takes to get that flywheel moving and then what it takes to keep it moving, and just, empowering great people. And it's built on such great foundations that, an exceptionally good book.
If you could go back in time and tell your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Advice to myself.
Knowing what you know now.
I think shake more hands. I think it's, shake more hands. Keep relationships going and don't ever be inclined to step back from a scenario. Put yourself out there, ask questions, have a curious mind, have a smile, and be proactive. Right? As if you can embody those things, and it's something that with my children I'm constantly sort of feeding down their faces. But it's just about being curious and then acting.
Fantastic.
And you never know when who you meet will come in handy, right? So just keep shaking hands.
A person that you look up to or has been inspired by?
You mentioned the business earlier, but Jeff Bezos. I mean, the Amazon story is incredible. Starting off as an online bookstore and turning into the behemoth that Amazon is today. What they own in the customer journey is mind-blowing. And where they're going is just complete business domination. They scare me.
They scare all of us, frankly. You're not alone, let me assure you.
Yeah, they scare me and they inspire me all at the same time. So
well, those are two good feelings. And then finally, a new COVID learned skill.
Oh, a COVID learned skill. I'm a PPE master. I know so much more about masks and gowns and sanitizers and nitrile gloves than I ever thought I would and ever thought I wanted to know. But there you go, COVID learned skill.
Well, Anna, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure. I think the listeners, the viewers will feel the same as I was. It's just fascinating. So thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you for being such an experienced and expert in this podcast space. You made it easy.
This has been Redefining Trade by TradeWindow with our host, Peter Foyston. Thanks for listening. Make sure you hit subscribe and keep an eye out for the next episode.